Hello, and welcome to COSC121, an introduction to programming. I'm Andy Coburn, and I'm the course supervisor. I'll also be teaching the first term of the course, so you'll be seeing a lot of me during that first term. I think we've got a great course lined up for you. We've got some terrific people and tutors who are going to help you to learn how to program in Python. So I'm really looking forward to the course. This year we've got some exciting innovations. In particular, we're using videos rather than lectures, and we think this is going to be very successful. There's going to be a separate video talking about why we're using videos rather than lectures. So for now, let's get started. And unfortunately, we need to begin with just some administration of the course. So we'll talk about the people you're likely to see very briefly. A separate video will discuss why we're using videos rather than lectures. We'll talk about the labs, which are tremendously valuable for you in learning how to program, the items of assessment, the important dates, the textbook, and the Learn site that you need to become familiar with quite quickly. So very quickly or briefly, the people that you're likely to meet in the course. I'm Andy Coburn, I'm the course supervisor, I'm teaching the first term, and if you need to come and see me, you can find me in room 313 of the Erskine building. If you need to email me, I'm andy.coburn@canterbury.ac.nz. Richard Lobb is a wonderful programming teacher. His passion in life is teaching programming, and you're going to love him in the second term. He's teaching the second term of the course. His email address is richard.lobb@canterbury.ac.nz, and you can find him in room 211 of the Erskine building. We also have a large cohort of tutors, and we have 3 chief tutors who are responsible for different aspects of the course. Yalini is the overall tutor coordinator. Paul McCown, you'll meet, he's primarily responsible for the assignments, and Sam Schofield deals with the labs. So if you have questions about the assignment, Paul's a good person to go to, Sam for the labs, and so on. Phil Holland is the go-to guy if you have any mechanical problems with issues in the labs, like a mouse that's not working or a machine that doesn't seem to be operating correctly. We also need class reps for the course. We have class reps for all courses at Canterbury, and if you would like to be one of the class reps for our large student group in 121, there's about 500 students we're anticipating, you can volunteer, so please email me if you'd like to become a class rep for the course. If you're approved as a class rep, and I'm hoping we'll get more volunteers than we actually have space for, I'll get back to you and tell you to volunteer via the UCSA, that's the Student Association, their website, ucsa.org.nz. It allows you to formally enroll as a class representative. But please don't do that until I've given you the okay. So volunteer, we'd deeply appreciate it. And the class reps act as a filter, if you like, between the large set of students in the course and the academics. And they also provide an anonymous resource so that students who have any concerns can raise those concerns through the class reps without letting their identity be known. As I said, there'll be a separate video dealing with why we're using no lectures in COSC121. We think this is going to work well, but I'll explain it in a separate video. So physically, where and when are elements of the course occurring? We have a drop-in class for those of you that have particular problems that you'd like to have addressed or ask additional questions about some of the content of the course. You don't need to come to the drop-in class. These are optional. They're held Thursdays from 2 to 3 in the large C1 lecture theatre, so we can sit 430 or so students in there. Because we're concerned that there's a risk that that C1 lecture theatre may overflow in the first couple of weeks, we're also providing a session from Fridays from 2 till 3 in the warehouse lecture theatre. But that's only until March 9th. Again, you only should come to the drop-in class if you have specific additional concerns or questions, issues that you'd like to ask the academic, me and Richard, about directly. The labs are the main place you're going to do your learning in COSC121. And these are held physically in the Erskine building, Lab 2, also known as Room 133. You're explicitly assigned to one lab per week, so that's 1 2-hour lab session, and there are a large number of tutors in there who can help you with any of your worries. But you're welcome to come to any of the other labs, provided there's a seat available. So if all these seats are occupied and you're already in there and a different formal lab is starting, please vacate it and make space for the people who are formally assigned to that particular lab. Labs, importantly, start this week, so they're occurring in parallel with lectures. So don't forget to go to your lab this week. The items of assessment in the course, well, there are 4 main components. There's the lab quizzes, that's 1% per lab per week. There are 4 programming assignments that will be distributed to the students evenly through the course, roughly 1 every 3 weeks, and the weighting of those increases gradually as we go through the course. So the latter assignments will be more difficult and larger than the earlier assignments, and they'll be worth more percentage points too. There's a mid-course quiz or test, and it's worth 15%, and it's currently scheduled for April 26th, but details of that will be confirmed. Okay, so April 26th for now. There's a slight chance it may change. And the examination has not yet been scheduled. It will be worth 60%, and it happens at the end of the course. Importantly, to pass COSC121, you need at least 50% overall, and for the invigilated items of assessment, that's the test and the exam, you must get at least 45% in those components. The textbook is the 2nd edition of Practical Programming, an introduction to computer science using Python 3. You can get it in the bookshop, you can also get it via the internet, and importantly, it's recommended but not required. When we first started teaching the course, we built the course around the 1st edition of this book. But gradually we've changed the way the course is organized, and the course has drifted away a little bit from the textbook. So that's why it's recommended rather than required. It is a good textbook. If you think you're going to need additional material, it's a very good place to go to. If you find an old 1st edition version of this book, just be cautious because it taught a different version of Python than the one we're using now. It taught Python 2. It's still a valuable resource, but there are a few little differences between Python 2 and Python 3 that could trip you up. So think twice before buying the 1st edition of the book if you find one. There are lots of other resources to help you in learning Python, and I've just listed a few here. I'm not going to go through them in details. Just make a mental note that if you need a different form of explanation at some point during the course, there are other resources, and you can find them on this slide that you're looking at now. Okay, so if you've never programmed before, you might be concerned that other people in the course have, and they're starting well ahead of you. Don't worry, we've built the course around people who have no previous programming experience. You're actually the target person for this course if you've got no previous programming experience. With what I'm showing you here is a chart that shows the end performance of students in the course, the mark that they've received in the course, versus the amount of self-reported experience that they've had in programming prior to starting the course. You'll see that the mean is not changing tremendously dependent on previous programming experience. You'll also see that the number of students who have no previous programming experience is highest at the point of no previous experience. 180 had no previous experience in this sample, 110 had very little, 120 had some, and relatively few students, only 79 in this sample, had lots of previous programming experience. So while some students will have lots of previous programming experience, the majority won't have. So don't worry, we've built the course around people with no previous programming experience. It's very important to realize, though, that programming is a skill, and the key mechanism for becoming competent in programming is practice, practice, practice. Doing it yourself. So the lab work, that's why we stress the lab work and the assignment work so much. You're not going to learn programming by passively reading a textbook, reading the lecture notes, or watching your friends do it. Critically, of course, copying any code, that's never going to help you learn, and we're concerned that you learn to program. So please don't copy any code at any time during this course. Okay? So you're going to learn by doing, and that's practice, practice, practice. How to succeed in 121? Well, I've already referred to this briefly already. Do the labs and start them early. Okay, it's very important that you start the lab work early. The same goes with the assignments. When the assignments get released, they'll be available to you for several weeks. Don't leave it to the last minute, because sometimes you'll find you need to work quite hard to get those assignments to a point of completion. Lots of students do also find when they're learning to program that at some point they hit a sort of mental barrier, and there's some component of programming that they simply don't get. Keep working at it. Don't give up. Often people find that they just work at it, and then eventually it clicks, it mentally clicks, and they find their way through whatever programming hurdle they've encountered. The best way to overcome these hurdles is to repeatedly practice, practice, practice. So do the lab work, read the book, watch the videos if you need to, and then try the exercises that are given to you, particularly in the labs. So experiment with code, and also Google searches you'll find can be very useful because other people are likely to have encountered the same problems in understanding that you come across. Very importantly though, programming is an intellectual skill. So it's critical that you think and try to solve your problems in a thoughtful manner, rather than just randomly trying to adjust lines of code. That's never going to succeed. Why do all of the labs? Well, here's a chart showing you the average mark in the exam from students in this sample is from COSC121 semester 2 in 2016 versus the lab marks. And you'll see there's pretty much a linear correspondence between the marks attained in the labs and the marks attained in the exams. So if you do the labs and do well in the labs, you're likely to do well in the exam. Same goes for the assignments, although it's even more linear here. So the better you do in your assignments, the better you do in your exams. And you can work, the way we've structured the course, you can work through the assignments to the point where you pretty much know what mark you're going to get using the tools we provide you with in the course prior to the final submission. So work on the labs, work on the assignments. Keep up with the pace of the course. The Learn website is going to be critical for you for all courses at the University of Canterbury, particularly so really for an especially online course like COSC121. So the Learn website will look something like this. It'll have links to all of the lecture material, the labs and the tutors information, test and exam info, assignment info, and also forums that allow you to communicate with other members of the course and with tutors in the course. So learn, definitely become familiar with it very quickly. And in the next video, we'll be looking at the quiz server that's going to be used for the lab work. It's very similar to the Learn site. Here's a rough timetable for you to look over. As I said, I'm teaching the first term of the course, and Richard Lobb is teaching the second term of the course. You can go over this in your own time. This week, of course, we're doing introduction, expressions, assignments, and simple functions, and the labs are starting this week. So make sure you do your first lab this week. By the end of the course, you'll see you'll be programming graphical user interfaces, similar to the apps that you might see on a mobile device or any computing system. And you'll also be covering object-oriented programming. So you're going to know a lot of programming constructs by the end of the course. Finally, well done for taking COSC121. Programming is a very valuable thinking exercise. It teaches you how to think formally, so it's good for any academic endeavor. But if you're going to be a psychologist, a physicist, an engineer, whatever academic discipline you intend to finally take, programming is becoming an essential skill because it gives you tools to process data and produce really valuable computing applications that will help you in your discipline as you go through the university. If you're going to be a computer scientist, obviously you need to learn how to program, and there is a compelling need in industry for more professional programmers. So this chart here shows you just some of the local industry in Canterbury that is currently clamoring to have more programmers available to them to work in the industry. So I really hope you find Computer Science 121, Introduction to Programming, a valuable course. I think you will. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see more of you in the upcoming videos. Thanks.